Today, we're digging into something that dictates a huge part of your day, your commute. We're going to break down something called level of service. Think of it as a hidden report card that grades the roads, airports, and all the infrastructure we rely on every single day.
You know that feeling, right? One day you're just sailing down the highway, music blasting, not a single worry. But the very next day, you're completely stuck in gridlock, inching forward, wondering what on earth happened? Why is it so wildly different?
Well, let's get into it, because it's not just random chaos. Turns out, civil engineers and transportation planners, they actually have a system for this. It's a whole framework for measuring and grading traffic flow, and it's how they figure out how well our transportation systems are really working. And that system, it's called level of service, or just LOS for short. The easiest way to think about it is like a letter grade, from A to F, that describes the quality of traffic on any road or at any intersection. It's really the fundamental tool they use to analyze traffic. At its most basic, level of service helps us put a name to these two totally different experiences. On the one hand, you have this wide open road. That's what an engineer would call a high level of service. And on the other hand, you've got that, total gridlock. That's the other end of the spectrum, a complete breakdown of flow. So here's the official definition. Level of service is a qualitative measure that grades traffic from A to F. Simple enough, right? A is the absolute best, we're talking free-flowing traffic, and F is the worst, total, complete gridlock. But what do these grades actually feel like when you're behind the wheel? Well, an A is free flow. You've got about 550 feet between you and the next car. You can do whatever you want. And F is, well, it's gridlock. But here's the really interesting part, grade C. Things are stable, yeah, but it's a little tight to maneuver. Most drivers are still pretty comfortable, though. And believe it or not, C is often the design target for city planners. I mean, an A is great, but it's just not efficient or cost-effective to build roads that are basically empty all the time.
And this isn't just about a feeling, by the way. It's all based on cold, hard data. At intersections, for example, the level of service is calculated by the average delay for each vehicle. A grade A means you're waiting less than 10 seconds. But if you get stuck at an F intersection, you could be sitting there for over 80 seconds at a single light.
Okay, so we get how LOS works for roads, but this concept is actually much bigger than that. So now let's switch gears and see how it works in a totally different environment, airports.
See, at an airport, the whole objective changes. I mean, yeah, you still want people and planes to move around smoothly, but there's this huge emphasis on being cost-effective. You want a great passenger experience, for sure, but you don't want to build a massive terminal that's way too big and costs a fortune to run.
And because the goals are different, the grading system is different too. The International Air Transport Association, that's IATA, they use this 4-category system. The sweet spot, their target, is optimum. It's that perfect balance. And this shows the new tension perfectly. They're not just trying to avoid failure, they're actively trying to avoid overdesign, which is just a fancy way of saying they don't want to waste money on facilities that are too big for their own good. So let's put it all together. Road planners are actually okay with a C or even a D grade during rush hour, because building for a perfect A all the time would be unbelievably expensive. Airport planners, on the other hand, have this specific goal of avoiding over-design, so they don't waste money. It's a really fascinating difference in how they think about the problem. Now, you might hear a term that sounds kinda similar, especially in the business world, a service level agreement, or SLA. It's really important to know the difference. An SLA is not a planning tool. It's a binding contract that lays out specific, measurable promises about a service.
And here's the key distinction. When your city says it wants to maintain a level of service D on a busy street, that's a planning guideline. It is not a contractual promise to you, the driver. An SLA is a promise. A level of service is a plan. Big difference. So we've got this whole established system for grading our infrastructure. It all makes sense, right? But what happens when some new technology shows up that just doesn't play by the old rules? What happens when the solution actually becomes part of the problem? Which brings us to a real-world study from Lake Nona, Florida. It's this community that's become a testing ground for autonomous shuttles. And these shuttles, they're running on public roads, right alongside regular cars with regular human drivers. So researchers wanted to know, what's the actual impact here? What are these shuttles doing to the traffic? So they built this incredibly detailed microscopic traffic simulation, fed it real-world data, and ran the numbers to find out. And the results were definitely not what you might expect. Here's the core finding. Compared to the baseline with no shuttles at all, adding these slow-moving shuttles, which were crawling along at about 9.5 miles an hour, it actually increased the overall traffic delay for everybody. The shuttles themselves were creating the bottlenecks.
The researchers put it very plainly in their paper, and this quote just sums it up perfectly. The low speed of the shuttles, which was probably designed for safety, was actually making the overall level of service worse for everyone else on the road.
So what's the fix? Well, the simulation showed that to solve the problem, the shuttles just needed to go faster. Specifically, they needed about a 5-mile-per-hour boost during off-peak times and a 10-mile-per-hour boost during peak traffic, just to get the system's overall delay back to normal.
You know, this whole case study really forces you to take a step back. Our systems for measuring traffic, they were all built around human drivers. But the world is changing, and our technology is throwing all these new variables into the mix that the old rulers, well, they just weren't designed to measure.
And that leaves us with this final thought. Level of service is an incredibly powerful tool, but this Lake Nona study shows its blind spots. As autonomous vehicles, delivery drones, and who knows what else start sharing our spaces, is a system designed for cars still the right report card? It makes you wonder, if our technology is changing this fast, do we need to change the very way we measure our world too?